Thank everyone for your patience, but we may be rewarded when we're all done here. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the July meeting for the Germantown Design Review Commission. May we establish a quorum, please?
Sure. Mr. Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Here.
Mr. Sloan,
Present.
Mr. Lacey,
Here.
Alderman Owens. Okay. Chairman Bruns.
Here.
Did I miss anyone? No, okay.
Okay to proceed?
Mhm.
Okay, very good. We do have a quorum. Mr. Owens will be in shortly. Alderman Owens. Now time to approve the minutes from our June meeting. May I have a motion?
Motion to accept the
approve.
minutes.
Oh, go ahead.
Second.
Very good. Any comments, discussion? Hearing none, please call roll.
Mr. Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Sloan,
Yes.
Mr. Lacey,
Yes.
Chairman Bruns.
Yes, minutes are approved. Thank you. And that will bring us to our agenda for this evening. Starting with the consent agenda, we were in the executive session and have made some changes. As noted on the agenda presented, item 4A, Old Field Green, approval of subdivision entrance feature and landscaping of common open space. Item 4B, Germantown Municipal School District, approval of sign package. Item 4C, Forest Hill Elementary School, approval of sign package. 4D, Stone Creek Center, approval of revised sign policy. 4E, Warehouse 67, approval of 2 wall signs. Now becoming 4F is Fuller Farm, approval of tree plan, tree mitigation. 4G, Let It Fly, approval of 2 wall signs. And 4H, Delta Life Fitness, approval of wall sign. Is there anyone in the audience or on the commission that would like to have any of these items removed from the consent agenda? I'd like to remind all the commissioners that by voting on the consent agenda, you are agreeing to each of the cases that have been listed tonight. You've read and reviewed each of the applications with staff and the applicant and determined no further discussion is necessary. May I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Actually, if you don't mind, I need to recall that motion to approve,
I will
and I'll
accept that.
explain later.
I'll accept that. May I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Are there any contingencies with any of the consent agenda items?
Any second?
Oh, pardon me.
I'll second.
Now, would it,
Right, so I need to recuse myself from items 4D, Stone Creek, approval of the revised sign policy, and 4G, Let It Fly, with the approval of the 2 wall signs.
thank you. We do not need to list any special contingencies with any of the items on the consent agenda, specifically. As discussed tonight is fine. Very good. Please call roll.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Lacey,
Yes.
Mr. Sloan,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Chairman Bruns.
Yes, thank you. Oh. just one clarification on the consent agenda, item 4G as it is tonight, let it fly. That approval will be contingent upon state approval of the business name. Very good. So that is our consent agenda. If one of your items was on the consent agenda, you can enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will begin the other items. Next item is 5A, Oldfield Green. Staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The project before you is Oldfield Green. It is a proposed new subdivision located just north of Winchester Boulevard off of Forest Hill Irene Road. It is currently a heavily wooded site with 2 single-family homes on it. The proposed subdivision is approximately 20 acres and 33 lots. Each lot would be a minimum of 15,000 square feet, and there's 1.42 acres of open space. The Planning Commission approved the subdivision plat for this subdivision on October 2nd, 2018. The request before you is in regard to the tree mitigation for this subdivision. Currently, the project site has 827 trees. It is a very heavily wooded site, and that equals 15,040 caliper inches of trees. Per the original tree plan submitted to the Planning Commission, 7,782 caliper inches are proposed to be removed. You can see here, as part of the infrastructure development for the site, everything within this area is being proposed to be removed. At the subcommittee, DRC subcommittee meeting, the DRC requested more information, and specifically they requested to see how many trees would potentially be removed once the subdivision is fully developed. The developer is putting in the infrastructure and the roads here, but the developer is not building these lots. These lots will be sold to individual home builders to decide how to develop them and which trees would be removed. The Design Review Commission subcommittee requested to see how many trees would be potentially removed on each lot within the building setback area, as well as any trees that might have to come out due to other infrastructure or easements on individual lots. You can see here again, this shows you a little bit more. The white is what was approved at Planning Commission as coming out as part of the grading plan, and that is what the developer will need to take out in order to develop the subdivision. This option is presented by the developer. It's not their proposed scenario. However, it shows how many trees would be removed if the front halves of the lots were graded, as well as a 3,000 square foot building pad. So using that scenario, I'm going to go back to this table that shows the amount of trees in caliper inches that would be removed from that first phase that we talked about, the amount of trees that would be removed from the second phase, this mass grading option. That gives you a total amount of 10,241 inches is being removed for the subdivision development as presented in the second plan I showed you. There are trees on the site, however, that don't have value. That was broken down in an arborist report, and then you see here the caliper inches of trees that do not have value. Additionally, there are trees that are coming out due to the Forest Hill Irene Road expansion, and there are dead trees. So those are totaled here. Those would be deducted then from the mitigation. Additionally, trees are being planted on the common open space, and trees will be planted on each lot, 2 trees on each lot. So, oops. That number here, 402.5 inches. Therefore, per the scenario that I showed you with the mass grading of the front of all lots, this is the total amount that would be removed. This is the amount that does not need to be mitigated, as discussed, and then this is the remaining amount that would need to be mitigated. The developer is requesting a waiver from the mitigation requirements as outlined in section 22-108. They are asking for a waiver as they are retaining trees along the perimeter along the perimeter of the site here, and are more trees than in many of the other developments that are around in the surrounding areas. The Design Review Commission has the option to waive the tree mitigation or to require a lesser tree mitigation. Per the ordinance, the trees are to either be mitigated on site, they are to be mitigated on public land, or there can be a payment in lieu of fee. The Design Review Commission has the authority to either grant a partial waiver or a complete waiver, dependent on the information presented. Additionally, as a condition of approval, it is requested at this time that the entire tree mitigation for the entire development, all lots, be determined at this time. At Planning Commission, there was a condition that was put on the project that the trees on these outer lots here, that they be determined at the time of building permit application and foundation survey. At that time, there wasn't the revised tree ordinance, which allows for a mitigation option of a payment in lieu of fee. Therefore, at this time, since there are more options available, it's requested that the development be looked at holistically and comprehensively as to all trees that might potentially be removed as part of the development of the subdivision. That concludes staff's report, and the applicant is here as well to make a presentation.
Thank you. Applicant presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Corey Brady, 9967 Bentwood Creek Cove, Collierville, Tennessee. I'm representing Vince Smith, Oldfield Green LLC, on the development of the Oldfield Green subdivision. As proposed, we spoke fairly extensively at the subcommittee, and I appreciate your time there. And following up from that meeting, we supplied staff with a significant amount of analysis and information based on what we heard you guys asked us to provide. And what you guys asked us to do was to identify how many trees within the building envelopes would be removed when the homes came in. That map wasn't included for some reason in the presentation, but I have, just moving forward, I have a stick also. So this slide here is the one that was what you guys asked us to prepare, and what we're calling this is the limited grading option. This is what we propose or prefer to do. The red represents a 3,200 square foot, or would facilitate a 3,200 square foot slab area, not total square footage, but the slab. So it's a large home within that envelope. The red basically is that large home from side setback to side setback, front yard setback to the rear of the property. Again, we know that this is representative, but it's a pretty good look that the house could slide anywhere in that building area, and I quantified how many trees were going to be removed under that scenario, and it was an additional 1,400 inches, I believe, going to be removed under the limited grading option. What we did, we then prepared this as a volunteer effort to say, okay, let's say worst case scenario, because we don't know what the individual home is going to be. We're not the home builders. So this is what I consider, what we talked about, a monolithic slab option. If you were to come in and grade the parallel strip from the front, completely clear cut, flatten, grade, and terrace the lots to put in monolithic slabs, this is what the impact would be. And that was an additional inches to be removed in the neighborhood of, let's see, 2,400. So about 1,000 more inches of trees being removed under this option. And what I have here, if you'll hand this out, is a spreadsheet that basically summarizes these, and it shows what the differences are between the limited options. So phase two, the first option in blue is the one Sarah presented in her chart. It's the same format as that chart, just continued on to show the limited option. And what you can see is at the bottom line, the worst case scenario, we were taking out an additional, or we were going to be taking out a total of 7,800 inches essentially. Under the limited grading option, we're taking out essentially 6,800 inches. Now the purpose of this is to say we're going to fall somewhere in that section. We're going to be either saving trees on the lot as many as we can. Some will have more removal. So I use this as bookends. But basically, we've got 7,800 inches versus 6,800 inches. But what is important is if you come down and extrapolate the overall cost liability of that, we're talking about, under our preferred option, we have a $567,000 payment impact fee. Under the mass grading scenario, we have a $650,000 fee, impact fee to cover these trees. What that boils down to is a mitigation liability for 33 lots. Each lot is $19,800 versus $17,195. And then the mitigation liability per acre, this impact fee represents a $32,000 fee on top of the cost of the lot under the mass grading option versus a $28,000 fee per acre on top of the cost to already acquire the land. It's for these reasons, that's why the arborist in his summary said this was a punitive ordinance. The ordinance did not take into account heavily wooded sites. It means well if you have 3 or 4 nice trees or 20 trees. We have 800 and something trees on 20 acres. Forgive me. And lastly, just so I don't take up too much of your time, I'd love to discuss this with you. The summary of all of this, basically, under the limited grading option, we have a tree density post-construction, 177 per lot. We have a density of 293 density units per acre post-construction. Under the mass grading option, we still have a tree density of 145 density units per lot. And then we have 241 density units per acre. That exceeds the Bartlett, Lakeland, the 2 most extensive ordinances in Shelby County, over 1,100%, over 1,000%. That's post-construction. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say the developer, the property is zoned R, the subdivision was developed in accordance with those bulk regulations. We volunteered to reduce our density to 1.6 units to the acre when your yields are going to be 2 to 2.1. So you take 7 to 10 lots off the table. That's a few $1 million that we voluntarily left off just purposely to save trees. Now what we're asking for is an additional tree mitigation fee, impact fee of an additional $500,000 to $650,000 on top of it. This is a deal killer. And we welcome Wes Hopper. I think it's the best thing Germantown can do. I've talked to him about the project. He and Eric Bridges do a lot of work together. These 2 guys are heavily respected. And I'm more than happy to get Wes's feedback on this because I think he'll tell you that, guys, I mean, this is a unique piece of property, and there's no bonuses, there's no incentive to save trees under this ordinance. There is only punitive damages. I mean, nothing is said about the 7,800 caliber inches we're saving with the development. So, again, I wanted to rush through that quickly just because I wanted to get it in the forefront, get it in front of you, and show what the actual numbers, the cost, the dollars and cents of this ordinance is. And from our perspective, we're happy to be the guinea pigs, but we know Germantown has a lot of heavily wooded sites, and y'all are going to have to deal with this on other properties as well. But these kind of numbers are absolutely a deal killer. And at the end of the day, it's easy to say, well, the property doesn't have to develop. Well, the property owner has rights. The property owner has a right to develop. The property is zoned. We did not zone it to this, and he could get far more density out of it than what we're doing and remove all the trees. It's just we got to figure out something with regard to the mitigation. So what we've asked for is, in light of what we have done, above and beyond what the straight zoning ordinance requires, we're asking for a waiver of the mitigation requirements based on the fact of what we've done from the head end to save trees. And that's really where we're at. And I ran through that very quickly, but I'm here to answer any questions you have. I hope we gave you the information you guys needed at the subcommittee. And for those that may not have been here, I hope that brief explanation was somewhat enlightening.
Thank you. Now, this is my first meeting with the new format. Is his presentation over when we discuss as a board? Or we can engage in? Okay, so with the applicant present at the podium? Okay, thank you, sir. This is a new format for me this month, so just want to make sure I get it right. Very good, so I'd like to open the public hearing. At this time, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this project? There are none. Is there anyone that would like to speak against this project? Also seeing none, that would conclude and close the public hearing. Very good. So at this time, I entertain a motion. That had a little question mark at the end, if you didn't hear it. Discussions post-motion.
All right, motion to approve a tree plan or tree mitigation for the entire development of Old Field Green subdivision, address 3620 and 3634 Forest Hill, Irene, subject to the commission's discussions, staff comments, and conditions in the staff report, and the documents and plans submitted by the application. Submitted with the application.
Very good. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, let's discuss as a board. Is there anyone that'd like to speak up first?
So my first question regarding the trees that are being saved, the number that you said, I believe it was 7,200 post-subdivision construction tree density, 7,258 density units. Is that correct? Okay, so that number includes the trees that are just in the gray area around, okay. Well, that's before the
That's
envelope.
Before home construction. This is the mass grading worst-case scenario option, and this is the limited grading preferred option that we presented. Those are the two. The red would represent tree removal, the blue would represent tree removal areas. And those areas are quantified as well. I don't believe you guys have that. I can pull up the tables as well, but every tree was tabulated and accounted for and applied in the spreadsheet that was provided to staff.
I believe
And
the
there was a
spreadsheet's part of the
summary.
plans that shows the,
Right.
I do thank you for a good presentation. And so, as you said, we're in this together. We have to find, in my opinion, a way to mitigate fairly for both the development and for the city and the canopy. I do agree that your lot costs incurred with either the 650 or the 560 does make the development not certainly profitable, but not worth doing. So the goal is to find a mitigation that appeases all parties. In the conversation we had prior in the executive session, that's where we wanted to, as a board, feel more comfortable with either Eric Bridges or Wes Hopper to help us understand better. The trees per acre is obviously very dense in this particular setting. Therefore, we're not arborists, or certainly not trained arborists to the degree of either of those two gentlemen. So it's a difficult task for us to put a true value toward this. You've done good documentation, you know, most all of what we've asked, good mapping on the trees to be removed, pre and post construction. All that is done well and helps explain part of the story. But when we look at 8,000, 7,000 inches to be removed, it's very easy in the equation as the ordinance is written to assess a dollar value to that. I think we all agree that that dollar value, again, to repeat myself, makes the project not worth doing and not what we're looking to do as a commission with this ordinance either. Being you're the first to come through here and the entire intention of the ordinance being written, we have a very delicate decision to be made in front of us. We would like the development, but we'd also like folks to continue with your conscience that you had in order to lessen the lots per this development in order to save the trees you could. So how do we encourage that if we let the ordinance get ignored, as it has in many years past, whether it was written the same way as it is now, we want to make sure that the ordinance is respected, and it's our job as this board in order to do that in a fair way toward you and toward us. That's why we're a little troubled in trying to have a decision tonight, where we've been asked ultimately to look at these figures, tree charts, all the removals, all the caliper inches, and then have to assign an assessment or in lieu of or any of that sort of things. I think it will behoove us as a commission to have more conversation with either Eric Bridges or Wes Hopper. Both are very qualified. Whether they tour the site, Wes Hopper did chime in just a little bit at our subcommittee meeting and mentioned that he did not have time to obviously go through every tree, and we're not interested in that. I don't need, we have the chart of what trees are being removed, 12-inch oak, 24-inch oak, and that's fine. Those are just figures. But more or less so we can get a better understanding from an arborist to walk through or assess this acreage and say, yes, it's very densely wooded in a rare sense. Really and truly, these trees aren't worth anything by the time you clean, and this is not speaking, this is the arborist could come back with this phrase and say the true value of these trees is not as high as a typical 24-inch oak growing in the middle of a field because it's a full-on oak. But this is a foam pole with 10 leaves at the top. That helps us make a better decision on this mitigation than all the charts and graphs and tree removals and dollar values and those sorts of things. Yeah. So that's, I think, what I'm certainly individually looking for, but I think as a commission as a whole is we just want to hear that from an arborist or a more educated person that in the trees that can walk through this space and then help us assess better what is being lost versus what's being kept. Yes, please.
Briefly, I agree with you. Everything's great. Eric and Wes both are highly respected. Obviously, we do other work with both of these guys. Eric's summary in his tree arborist report states that this is a degraded stand, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here. He's getting his doctorate right now. He's down in Starkville, but I asked him to come tonight, and he wasn't able to make it. I could forward you some email dialogue we had, but also his summary does state that it's a degraded stand, but also I think what the city's landing on is the WOR report, a worthy of retention report, where you go in and physically locate individual trees. In this case, I mean, that was not done on this property. I believe it was kind of done on the other property, but it wasn't based on tag trees. I asked Eric Bridges specifically about a WOR report on that, and he said he wouldn't feel comfortable preparing it because he wouldn't have an accurate location of the trees. He'd be somewhat second guessing it, and he said basically, and again, I'm happy to share the email, or Eric can speak for himself. I welcome you to reach out to either of them. But we talked about all of those things, and I think moving forward, that's probably where Germantown's going to land. But because we didn't have a WOR report and all of the expense incurred to do that, that's why we tried to save mass as opposed to individuals, because not every 60-inch tree is worthy of saving. Sometimes they need to go, they're diseased and other items. We're all, as planners and designers, guilty of looking at the size of the tree and assigning value to it. But in this case, that type of survey wasn't done, which again is why we went to mass. But we understand if you're wanting to hold the project to allow Eric to speak to it, we understand that. I think it's just going to kind of solidify our point on this project, to be honest.
I really and truly feel it's invaluable. The other item on the agenda tonight for tree mitigation, I think 90% of the conversation was spent with the arborist versus the plan. And
Yeah.
once we got a good feel for the stand of trees we were dealing with, then we moved toward the mitigation part of it. But we just need the best understanding we can have as of what stand of trees we're dealing with.
Yeah, again, happy to have them here. Do you have something?
Well, and I have one other thing to add to that is I like what you've presented here, but it still doesn't take into account, and I admittedly do not know how you do this, but it doesn't take into account swimming pools, back patios. You know, I don't know if it includes, I mean, tennis courts, basketball courts, I mean, whatever.
So the lots are
The
significantly.
name and address, please.
I'm
for the
sorry,
record.
Vince Smith, 355 Terra Lane, Memphis.
Thank you.
So I'm the developer, the proposed developer. So I think one thing when you look at your tree mitigation plan, especially because a lot of the vacant land in Germantown is heavily wooded, is do you reward someone that's going to come in and just do quality development and try to preserve the natural setting and surroundings and maybe give up lots or square footage in a commercial project or something else? Or do you reward the developer that comes in and just clear cuts it, puts as many lots as he possibly can on the property? Because if that's the case, then I can pay for that mitigation. Because we've left about 10 lots, maybe 7 lots out by not doing a cookie cutter neighborhood that I guess could have happened, which I would not have done because that's not what I do. But if you add the 7 to 10 lots in, and for what the sales price are, you're talking about $1.5 million, $1.7 million in sales and revenue. So at that time, I could pay $600,000 in mitigation cost. But because we don't have the density in the lots and we preserve the trees as our initial plan that we proposed, I think it's great to listen to the arborist because I'd like to know in detail what their thoughts are too going forward for me for future developments. But I think you're in a tough spot because we were approved and then the tree mitigation program was approved. And so through that, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I understand. I mean, you've got something new on the books, you've got to figure out how to work the new ordinance. But I guess I'm a bad one to come through first. I mean, if it was a field, like Corey said, and there were 100 trees and we were cutting down 50, that's a different set of circumstances. But the fact that we've got 750 trees, 800 trees on 20 acres, it's a tremendous amount of trees. So those are my thoughts.
And thank you for sharing, Vince. And yes, thank you for recognizing the difficult spot it is and understand that we're wanting to be as fair with good decisions as we can. And that's why we're requesting the extra time, is just to make sure we get this one right.
Absolutely happy with that.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table, or on.
Just a quick comment. We do have an arborist that is coming on board, Mr. Hopper, as you mentioned. I believe he starts next week. Perhaps it's possible that we have, I mean, I don't want to bombard him right off the bat, but this is so important that we get it right out of the gate, as you mentioned, with this fresh ordinance just being on the books. I'd love it if we could maybe have a work session with Eric as there as well. I know they have worked together in the past, and Mr. Brady, Mr. Smith, and get some recommendations to us from him, because that's going to be invaluable, having him on staff and being able to move forward from that based on his recommendation and not just some arbitrary something that we come up with. Just I don't know. Paul has a little bit of expertise in this area, but I certainly don't, and lean heavily on that. So that's looking to our development staff to see if they might be able to coordinate that with us, and maybe that's in conjunction with our subcommittee. I don't know.
Thank you. Anything further? Very good. So the motion is to approve, or to waive, if I recall correctly, as the motion is written and stated.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the conversation tonight, we request that the project be held to give the city time to speak with Wes Hopper and come up with a solution for waiver. We're happy to work with the city in any way possible. We do want it on the record that our numbers, our fees, our costs that we're extrapolating are based on a $250 tree, replacement tree, which obviously I believe is to be on the low end, but that was the number provided to us. So I think that valuation of a tree payment is important too.
Well, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Very good. We withdraw the motion? good. Very good. Well, thank you. So then this item will be tabled for the month of July. Thank you both for being here, very, very much. Very good. That would leave us with one remaining agenda item, which is 5E, Stancil Square, approval of storefront modification. It is currently on the table. Very good. So do I ask for a motion to remove it from the table? Requesting that motion now.
Motion to remove item 5E from the table, Stephen Stancil Square approval of storefront modification painting.
Second.
Very good.
You second.
Please call roll.
Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Sloan?
Yes.
Mr. Lacy?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. It has been removed from the table. And that would bring us to old business and new business. Is there any before us? I don't believe there is.
Just a quick note of old business. I think I mentioned this in executive session, but just to let the DRC know that the Trevure sign package and warrants for that were approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen last night unanimously. And so we look forward to them having their signage and their directory for both those buildings, as well as the hotels.
Wonderful. I think we'll see that pretty soon, I'm sure. Well, very good. We are adjourned.
Yes, sir.